The glass shattered an inch from her face. "Get out," the Duke said, "before I have you dragged out." Every nurse before her had run. Praskovia only knelt, gathered the broken pieces into her apron, and set a fresh glass in front of him. "Throw that one too, Your Grace. I have all night." No one had spoken to Vsevolod Ostrovsky like that in 11 years, and she already knew how he'd lost his legs. Who was this woman that not a single house in England would keep? Why did her hands go still the moment he said his brother's name? And what happens to a man who has spent 11 years praying to die, when he finally meets someone who refuses to let him? Stay with me. This one gets darker before it gets beautiful, and I promise you'll want to be here when she finally tells him the truth. If you're new, please subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it's the only reason stories like this keep getting told. The glass was still ringing on the floor when she reached for it. Praskovia Zviajina had been in the house for 19 minutes. 19. She had not taken off her coat. She had not been shown a room. She had walked through a door, and a grown man had thrown crystal at her head, and now she was on her knees on his carpet, picking up the pieces, like a woman gathering apples. Vsevolod Ostrovsky watched her from the chair. He had a face that had once been beautiful, and had stopped bothering. Dark hair too long at the collar, a blanket over his legs, that he hated more than he hated anything else in the world. "You didn't flinch," he said. "No, Your Grace." "Why not?" She stood, cupping the glass in her apron. "Because you missed on purpose." The room went very quiet. Something moved behind his eyes then, quick, almost like being caught. He looked away first. In 11 years, he had never looked away first. "Get out!" he said again, but the words had gone soft in the middle, and they both heard it. She set the fresh glass down anyway, filled it from the pitcher, and left. Outside in the corridor, the housekeeper was waiting with her hands folded like a woman at a funeral. Glafira had run this house for 30 years, and had buried 2 duchesses and 1 scandal, and she looked at Praskovia the way you look at a stain on good linen. "You lasted longer than the last one," Glafira said. "How long did she last?" "She never went in." Praskovia kept walking. Her hands were shaking now that no one important could see them, and she pressed them flat against her skirt until they stopped. She had learned that trick in a house in Wiltshire, in a room she did not let herself think about, on a night that ended with her name written in a ledger next to a word that had followed her ever since. Dismissed. No character given. 6 words. 6 words could starve a woman. 11 houses had turned her away since. The 12th had not even opened the door. And then a letter of hire had come from a place people whispered about, offering triple wages and asking no questions at all. And Praskovia had understood exactly what that meant. Nobody pays triple for easy work. They pay triple for work that has already broken somebody else. She climbed the servants' stair to the room they finally gave her, and she sat on the edge of the bed in her coat, and she thought about how a man's eyes look when he is trying to make you leave before you can decide to. She knew that look. She had worn it. The bell rang at 3 in the morning. She was awake. She had not undressed. Downstairs, his door was open, and the room smelled like brandy and cold ash, and Vsevolod was on the floor. He had gone down hard. The chair lay on its side beside him, one wheel still turning, and he was dragging himself toward the fireplace with his arms alone, teeth bared, breath ripping in and out of him. His shirt was soaked through. There was blood on his knuckles where he had hit the hearthstone. He heard her, and his whole body went rigid. "Don't," he said. "Don't you dare touch me." Praskovia did not touch him. She sat down on the floor. Just that. She crossed the room, lowered herself beside him with her back against the hearth, and sat, close enough that he could feel her there, and far enough that he could pretend she wasn't. "What are you doing?" he said. "Sitting. I gave you an order." "You did." She looked at the fire. "I'm very bad at those. It's why nobody keeps me." He laughed. It came out of him like something tearing. "You're mad." "Possibly." They stayed there. The clock somewhere in the hall struck the quarter hour. His breathing slowed, one ragged pull at a time, and at some point his head came to rest back against the stone, and his eyes closed, and he stopped fighting the floor. 11 years, he said, barely a voice at all. 11 years, and I still reach for a leg that isn't there. I know. You don't? No, she agreed, but I know what it is to reach. He turned his head and looked at her properly for the first time, firelight on her face, plain, tired, unafraid. "Who are you?" he said. "Praskovia, that isn't what I asked." And she smiled, small and sad, and did not answer. She got him up. It took 20 minutes, and neither of them spoke about how and when he was back in the chair, with his hands bandaged and the blanket where he could not see it. He watched her bank the fire and said, without warning, "My brother recommended you." Her hands stopped, only for a second, a half second. But he was a man who had spent 11 years with nothing to do but watch people, and he saw it. "Yarapolk," he said slowly. "You know him. I should sleep, Your Grace. So should you." Praskovia. She was already at the door. "Good night." She did not run down the corridor. She wanted to. She got as far as the landing, and stopped, and put her hand flat on the wall, and breathed like a woman who had just come up from underwater. Because she did know Yarapolk Ostrovsky. She had known him in Wiltshire. And in the room below, the Duke sat alone in the dark with his bandaged hands, and thought about the way she had gone still, and thought about the accident nobody in this house was allowed to speak of, and thought, for the first time in 11 years, that he might want to live. She did not sleep. She sat by the window until the sky turned the colour of dirty milk, and she thought about Wiltshire. There had been an old man in that house, Lord Bewley, 81 years old, thin as paper, with a laugh like a cupboard door. She had nursed him for 2 years, and he had called her girl, and then Pasha, and then, near the end, daughter, which he had no right to do, and which she had let him do anyway. She had held his hand through the bad nights. She had learned the exact hour he liked his window opened. And then a guest had come to stay for the shooting, a young gentleman with a beautiful mouth and warm hands, and a way of listening that made a tired woman feel like the only person in England, Yarapolk. She could still remember how kind he had been. That was the part that made her sick, not the cruelty. The kindness came first, and it was expensive, and she had paid for it without ever being told the price. The doses started changing in October. She noticed, because she noticed everything, because noticing was the only thing a woman with no money and no family owned. She said it out loud once, quietly, to the physician. Just once. Lord Bewley was dead in 9 days, and by then her box was on the drive in the rain, and the word in the ledger was written in a hand she did not recognize. Dismissed. No character given. She had never spoken his name since. Not to a magistrate, not to a friend, not to God. Because a woman like her says a name like his, and the world does not turn its head, it turns its back, and then it puts her somewhere she does not come out of. 12 houses. 2 years. A winter where she ate once a day and called it enough. And now she was in the brother's house, and the brother was upstairs bleeding through his bandages, and nobody had told her anything. The morning bell rang. Glafira was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, already dressed, already disapproving. He takes breakfast at 8. He will not eat it. You will bring it anyway. You will not speak of last night to anyone in this house. Why not? Because I am telling you not to. Praskovia took the tray. He was at the window when she came in. Someone had got him into the chair before dawn, and she wondered who, and then she saw the bruise on his forearm and understood he had done it himself, alone, in the dark, rather than ring for help. Proud. God, he was proud. It came off him like heat off a stove. "You're still here," he said, without turning. "Yes. Everyone is very disappointed." She set the tray down. "Shall I go and apologize to them?" He turned then, and there was something almost like a smile at the corner of his mouth, gone before it finished. Up close in daylight, he looked worse and better at once. 36, maybe 38. A jaw that had not been shaved in 5 days. Grey in his hair too early, and his eyes, which were the trouble, because they were not the eyes of a broken man. They were the eyes of a man who was still fighting a war everybody else thought had ended 11 years ago. She saw why the others had run. It was not the shouting. It was this, being looked at by someone who could actually see you. "Sit down," he said. "I don't sit with dukes. You sat with one on the floor at 3 in the morning." She sat. He pushed the plate toward her. "Eat. You're thin in a way that isn't fashion." Her face went hot. "Your Grace, I am not being kind. I am being accurate." He looked out the window again. "You have the hands of a woman who has worked, and the shoulders of a woman who has been waiting to be hit. I know both. Eat." She ate. It was the first hot meal she had taken sitting down in 8 months, and she hated how badly her body wanted it, and she hated more that he had noticed, and somewhere underneath all of it, a small stupid part of her chest ached, and she pushed it down hard. "Do not," she told herself. "Do not start liking him. You have nothing left to lose, except the last thing, and this is exactly how the last thing goes." He let her finish before he spoke again. "You'll shave me. I am not a valet. My valet left in March. Everyone leaves in March." He held out the razor, handle first. "Unless you're afraid." She should have said no. She took it. The room was very quiet while she worked. She tipped his chin up with 2 fingers and felt him stop breathing for a half-second, and pretended she had not. His pulse moved under her thumb. He smelled like brandy and soap and the cold. His eyes stayed open the whole time and never once left her face. "You've done this before," he said. "Once. For a man who was dying." "Did he die?" "Yes." "Was it your fault?" Her hand did not shake. She was proud of that. Later. "No. But somebody said it was." She set the razor down in the bowl. The water clouded pink from a nick she had not meant to make. "You should not ask me questions you're not ready to hear the answers to," she said. And he said, very quietly, "I've had 11 years of nothing but questions, Praskovia. I'm ready for anything." She left the room before she could find out if that was true. It was the medicine chest that did it. She was tidying his room that afternoon, because idle hands got her thinking, and she opened the physician's case to count what was there, the way she had counted in every house since Wiltshire, the way she would count until she died. 6 bottles, 5 of them ordinary. The 6th had no label. She uncorked it and put it under her nose, and her whole body went cold, from the scalp down. She knew that smell. Bitter almond, and something sweeter underneath. She had smelled it in an old man's room in October, in a house in Wiltshire, 9 days before he stopped breathing. Behind her, the door opened. Glafira stood in the frame, with her hands folded, looking at the bottle in Praskovia's hand, and her face did something that was not surprise. "Put that back," she said. "What is this?" "Put it back, girl. How long has he been taking it?" Glafira crossed the room fast for a woman of 60, took the bottle out of her hand, set it in the case, and closed the lid. "You will forget you opened that," she said. "You will do your work and take your wages, and when the family comes, you will keep your eyes on the floor." Praskovia's mouth was dry. When the family comes. Friday. Glafira straightened her apron. His brother is coming home on Friday, and his brother's intended, Miss Vorontsova, who was engaged to his grace before the accident and had the good sense to survive it. She paused at the door. "Whatever you are, you have 4 days to decide whether you are still here when they arrive." Downstairs, a clock struck 4. Somewhere above her, a man who had thrown a glass at her head and then eaten breakfast with her was sitting alone in a room with a bottle that should not. She did not put the bottle back the way Glafira thought she had. That night, she filled a small vial with what was in it, hid the vial in the lining of her coat, and topped the bottle up with cooled sugar water so the level would not change. Then she sat on her bed with her hands in her lap and understood that she had just made herself a criminal in a house where nobody would believe a word she said. She gave him the false dose the next morning at 8, and again at noon, and again at 9. By Tuesday afternoon, he was shaking. She found him gripping the arms of the chair like a man on a ship in weather, jaw locked, sweat running down his temple into his collar. His eyes tracked her across the room too fast. "Something is wrong with the house," he said. "It keeps moving. The house is still, Your Grace." "Then something is wrong with me." He laughed, and it frightened her, the sound of it. "That is not new information." She knelt and put the back of her hand against his cheek, burning. His pulse was going like a bird in a box. "Look at me," she said. "How long have you been taking the medicine from the chest?" "Since the accident. 11 years. Innocenti says it is for the pain. Do you have pain?" He went quiet, really quiet, the kind that comes before something honest. "I have nothing," he said. "I have not felt my legs in 11 years, and I have not felt anything else either. Some mornings I cannot remember my mother's face. I sleep 14 hours and wake up tired. I thought that was grief." He turned his head and looked at her, and there was something raw underneath the fever. "That is not grief, is it?" "No. What have you done to me?" "I have stopped it." His hand closed around her wrist. Not hard, just there, holding on, the way a man holds a rail. "Then stay," he said. She stayed. She stayed through Tuesday night, while his teeth chattered, and he cursed her and apologized in the same breath. She stayed when he threw up into a basin and would not let her look at him. She put cold cloths on his neck and talked to him about nothing, about the price of coal, about a dog she had loved when she was 9, because a voice is a rope, and she knew what it was to be down a well. At 4 in the morning, he stopped shaking and slept with her hand still in his, and she sat on the floor beside the chair and looked at his face and thought, very clearly, "Oh no, not this, not now, not him." She took her hand back before he woke. What she did not know was that on Monday he had sent a man south. He had not told her. He had told nobody except the groom, who rode out at dawn, with a name and a county, and instructions to knock on doors and pay for answers. He had done it because she had gone still when he said Yaropolk, and Vsevolod Ostrovsky had spent 11 years learning that the truth of a house lives in the half-seconds nobody thinks you notice. The groom came back Thursday at dusk, mud to the thigh, and stood in the study with his hat in his hands, and talked for 11 minutes. Praskovia was upstairs airing a room when Glafira came for her. "He wants you. Now?" Now. He was by the fire. Shaved, upright, clear-eyed for the first time since she had arrived, and that was somehow worse, because a clear-eyed Vsevolod missed nothing at all. "Close the door," he said. She closed it. "Wiltshire," he said. "Lord Bewley, 2 years of service. Every soul in that village said the same thing about you, and it was not what is written in your ledger." He turned the chair to face her fully. "They said you were the only one who sat with him. They said the old man asked for you at the end, and nobody would fetch you because you were already gone." Her throat closed. "They also said," he went on quieter, "that a young gentleman was staying in that house the autumn he died. Fair, charming. Went riding every morning, left the day after the funeral, and never came back. Your Grace, say his name. Don't ask me that. Say his name, Praskovia." "I cannot." Her voice broke on it, and she hated herself. "Do you know what happens to a woman who says a name like that? I have no family, I have no money, I have one dress that is not this one. If I say it, and I am wrong, I hang. If I say it, and I am right, I hang faster. You would not hang." He was very calm. "Not in my house." "Your house." She laughed, and it came out wet. "Your house is the one poisoning you. Your house has been feeding you that bottle for 11 years, and your housekeeper knows the smell of it, and your physician writes the order, and every single person under this roof has stood in a room and watched it happen and said nothing." She was crying now and did not stop. "So forgive me if I do not believe in the safety of your house." He said nothing for a long moment. Then he put out his hand. She looked at it. "Come here," he said. And she did. God help her. She crossed the carpet and took it, and he pulled her down until she was kneeling in front of the chair, with both her hands wrapped in both of his, and he said, "I will not let anyone take you out of here. Do you understand me? Not the law, not my family, not him. Now say the name." Her mouth opened. Outside, on the gravel, wheels. They both turned toward the window, lamps swinging in the dark, horses blowing, a carriage door, and a woman's laugh, bright and easy in the cold. Glafira's footsteps came running down the corridor, and she was in the doorway, white to the lips. She heard his voice in the hall before she saw him, and her body remembered before her mind did. Her stomach turned over, her hands went cold. 2 years fell away like a floor giving out, and she was back in Wiltshire, in the rain, with her box on the gravel, and nobody looking at her. She got behind the door of the linen room and stood there in the dark, with her palm over her mouth. That laugh, that same warm, easy laugh that had made an old man love him and a tired woman trust him. Glafira found her there, 10 minutes later. "He is asking for you," the housekeeper said. "His Grace. He wants you at dinner." Standing behind his chair. "No, that was not a request. I said no." Her voice came out shaking and furious. "Do you know what he will do? He will look at me and he will smile, and by morning there will be a story about a thieving nurse and a missing brooch, and I will be in a cell before the week ends. He has done it before. He is good at it." Glafira looked at her for a long moment. Something in the old woman's face moved and settled. "I have watched that boy since he was 6 years old," she said quietly. "I know exactly what he is good at." Then she turned and walked away, and Praskovia stood there, understanding that she had just been told something enormous and would not get another word of it. She went to him. Vsevolod was dressed for the first time since she had arrived. Black coat, proper collar, hair pushed back off his forehead, and he looked like what he actually was, underneath the blankets and the brandy, which was a duke. "You are afraid," he said. "Yes. Good. Be afraid and come anyway." He held out his hand, and she took it without thinking, and he turned hers over and looked at the palm, at the calluses, at the 2 years written into it. I have spent 11 years letting this house decide what happens to me. I am finished. Tonight I want him to see you standing behind my chair, and I want him to understand what that means. And what does it mean? He looked up. It means you are not alone anymore, he said. It means whatever he did to you, he now has to do to me first. Something cracked open in her chest so fast she had to look away. She had not cried in front of anyone in 2 years, and she was not going to start on a carpet in a rich man's room. I have carried this by myself, she said. I do not know how to put it down. Then do not put it down. Just stop carrying it alone. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist and nodded once, and that was all either of them said about it. The dining room was blazing with candles for the first time in a decade. Yaropolk Ostrovsky sat at his brother's right hand, golden and easy, cutting his meat like a man who had never once been hungry. Militsa Vorontsova sat opposite in blue silk with pearls at her throat, beautiful in the way a knife is beautiful, and she had already looked at Vsevolod twice with an expression that was not pity and was not love and was something greedier than both. Innokenty the physician sat at the far end and did not lift his eyes from his plate. Praskovia took her place behind the chair. Yaropolk saw her. She watched it happen. The fork stopped. The color went out of his face so fast it was almost funny, and for 1/2 second the charm slid off him, and there was nothing underneath it at all, just a cold animal calculation. Then he smiled. Vsevolod, he said warmly, you have a new nurse. I have. Where did you find her? You recommended her. The room went very still. Militsa's glass paused halfway to her mouth. Did I? Yaropolk said. Your letter said she was the only woman in England who would take the position. Vsevolod set down his knife. You were right. She is remarkable. She has done in 3 weeks what your physician failed to do in 11 years. Innokenty's fork rang against his plate. And what is that? Yaropolk asked. She has made me well. Praskovia felt the whole table lean. I stopped the medicine, Vsevolod said pleasantly. 9 days ago. I sleep 4 hours now, instead of 14. I can hold a cup. This morning, I remembered my mother's voice, for the first time since I was 25. He picked up his wine and looked at his brother over the rim. Extraordinary, is it not, Innokenty? 11 years of your treatment, and all I needed was to stop taking it. The physician had gone grey. Your Grace, the dosage was necessary for the nerve pain. I have no nerves left to pain me. You told me that yourself in the 2nd year. Nobody moved. Militsa laughed, light and quick, trying to save the evening. Well, what a happy thing. Vsevolod, you must let me drive out with you, now that you are so improved. Perhaps. You used to like driving out with me. I used to like a great many things, Vsevolod said, before I fell. And Yaropolk very quietly said, you did not fall. The words landed on the table like something dropped from a height. Militsa's smile froze. Innokenty stood up so fast his chair went over backwards, apologized to nobody, and left the room. Yaropolk laughed and reached for the wine as though he had made a joke. I mean the horse, of course. The horse threw you. Everyone knows that. But Praskovia was watching Vsevolod's hands, and Vsevolod's hands had gone white on the arms of his chair, and she understood in a rush of cold clarity that he had never once in 11 years been able to remember that morning, and that he had just realized it. She was clearing the corridor at midnight when Yaropolk stepped out of the dark and put his hand flat on the wall beside her head. Praskovia Zviajina, he said gently. You look thin. She did not move. You should have stayed lost, you know. It was a kindness, letting you go. I could have given the magistrate a very different account of what happened to that old man. You changed the doses. I did. He said it so easily, she felt the floor tilt. And you noticed, which was clever, and you told Innocenti, which was stupid, because Innocenti has worked for my family since he was 19. He leaned in. He still smelled like cedar and warmth, and it made her want to be sick. My brother is dying, Pasha. Slowly, which was the kind way. But now he has stopped taking his medicine, and he is remembering things, and that is a great deal less convenient for me. He knows what you are. He suspects. There is a world of difference, and men in chairs do not testify well. He straightened his cuffs. Leave tonight. Take £50 and go to Ireland, and I will forget I ever saw you. Stay, and I promise you will be arrested before Sunday for the murder of Lord Bewley, and this time I will not need to lie very hard. He walked away whistling. She stood in the dark a long time. Then she went upstairs, and she did not pack, and she did not run, and she felt something in her that had been bent for 2 years slowly straighten up. She was done running. She went to tell him. His door was open. The candles were out. The chair sat empty in the middle of the room with one wheel still turning, and the medicine case was open on the desk, and the 6th bottle was on its side, empty, and there was a smear of something dark on the floorboards, leading toward the window. Praskovia screamed his name into the... She followed the smear. It went out of his room, and down the corridor, and stopped at the study door. And the study door was open, and Innocenti was on the floor, beside the desk, with the empty bottle still in his hand. He was breathing. Barely. She got down beside him, and turned his head, and his eyes rolled toward her, wet and terrified. "How much?" she said. "All of it." "Why?" "He told me to." His mouth was blue at the corners. He said one of us was going to be blamed, and it was not going to be him. She put her hand behind his neck. "Where is the Duke?" "Stables." "Innocenti." "Where is he?" "The stables." A sound came out of him that was not quite a word. "He is going to do it the same way." He said, "Nobody questions a horse twice." Her whole body went cold. "The girth," Innocenti whispered. 11 years ago. It was cut halfway through, so it would hold at the mounting block and go at the gallop. I saw it in the tack room after. I saw it, and I washed my hands, and I wrote what I was told to write. You watched him ride out. I watched him ride out. "Say it again," she said. "Say it so I can carry it." Yaropolk cut the strap. Yaropolk killed the old man in Wiltshire. Yaropolk has been poisoning his brother for 11 years, and I mixed every bottle with my own 2 hands. He was crying now, a dry, ugly sound. "Tell him I am sorry. Tell him. Tell him yourself. Stay awake." But his eyes had already gone somewhere else. She ran, down the back stairs, through the kitchen, out into the black yard with the frost biting through her shoes, and the stable lantern was burning at the far end, one yellow square, in all that dark. Glafira caught her at the arch. The old woman was in her nightdress with a shawl thrown over it, and her white hair down her back, and she had a wooden box under her arm. "He came for the wheelchair an hour ago," Glafira said. "He told me his brother wanted air. Give me a lamp. Take the box." "I do not have time for a box." "You will make time." Glafira shoved it into her hands. 11 years ago, I went into that tack room, before the magistrate did. I took the strap off the wall, and I put it in here, and I locked it, and I said nothing, because I was a servant, and he was the son of the house, and no one on this earth would have believed me. Her voice cracked straight down the middle. "I have carried that boy's life in a box under my bed for 11 years. Do not let me have carried it for nothing." Praskovia took it and ran. The stable doors were half open. Vsevolod was in the chair in the middle of the aisle with the lantern hung above him, and a saddled horse stood tied beside him, stamping and blowing, and Yaropolk was leaning against the stall post with his coat off and his sleeves rolled like a man about to do honest work. There she is, Yarapolk said. I did wonder. Get away from him. You should have taken Ireland, Pasha. Vsevolod's head came up. His eyes found her, and something in his face broke open with relief, and then closed again into something much harder. He wants me on the horse, he said calmly. He has been explaining it for 20 minutes. A crippled man, drunk, sentimental, out in the night trying to ride again. Very sad, very believable, very, Yarapolk agreed. I remember now, Vsevolod said. The stable went quiet, except for the horse. I remember the morning. I remember you holding the bridle for me. You never held my bridle. You had not done a thing for me since we were children. And that morning you stood there smiling, and you held my horse, and you said, "Be careful, Seva." His hands were flat on the arms of the chair. You said, "Be careful." Yarapolk's smile did not move. You have been ill a long time. I have been poisoned a long time. There is a difference, and you know it, because you paid for it. You have no proof. Inkenti is on the study floor, with the bottle in his hand. Something flickered across Yarapolk's face then, the first real crack. He drank it, Praskovia said. All of it. He told me everything before he went under. He told me about the girth. Yarapolk pushed off the post. He moved fast. She had forgotten how fast, and he was between her and the door before she got 2 steps, and his hand closed around her throat and put her back against the stall wall so hard the wood shook. You stupid little woman, he said, almost kindly. You could have had 50 pounds. She could not breathe. The box fell, and then there was a sound she would hear for the rest of her life, wheels on stone, and a shout torn out of a man's chest, and Vsevolod came out of that chair. Not on his legs. He came out sideways and down, one hand on the wheel and one on the stall rail, throwing his whole weight where his weight had no business going, and he hit his brother at the hip and took him to the floor. Yarapolk went down laughing. He was still laughing when the fist landed. 11 years of hauling his own body upstairs and out of baths and off floors. 11 years of arms doing the work of legs. Yarapolk had spent 11 years looking at a blanket and never once thought about the hands. The second blow stopped the laughing. Seva. The third. Seva. Stop. She got her arms around him from behind and pulled, and he was shaking, sobbing. His knuckles split open again, and he let her take his wrist and hold it against her chest. He held my bridle, he said. I know. He was 9 years old, and he used to sleep in my bed when it thundered. I know. The yard was full of light by then. Grooms, the cook, half the household in nightclothes, and Glafira in the doorway, with a lantern held high, and behind her the magistrate's men, who had been riding since Glafira sent for them at midnight. Militsa Vorontsova stood at the edge of it all, in her blue silk, with her arms wrapped around herself. He was at the stable that morning, she said. Her voice was very small. I saw him from my window, and I never said. I married my silence, and I have worn it for 11 years, and it is the only thing I have ever owned. They took Yarapolk out through the yard. At the arch he stopped and turned his bloody face toward Praskovia and smiled. The Wiltshire charge went to the magistrate on Friday morning, he said, before any of this. They are already coming for you. Then they put him in the cart. The house did not sleep. Inokenti died at 4. Glafira sat with him anyway. At dawn, Vsevolod was in his chair by the window, with his hands bound in fresh linen, and Praskovia was on the floor beside him, with her head against his knee, and neither of them had spoken in an hour. Stay, he said. I am not a nurse anymore. There is nothing to nurse. I did not say stay as a nurse. She lifted her head. I have been dead for 11 years, he said. Then a woman knelt on my carpet and picked up my glass and told me she had all night. I do not want a caregiver, Praskovia. I want the person who sat down on the floor beside me and did not touch me and did not leave. He looked at her, and his eyes were wrecked and steady. "I want you, however long they give me, however this goes." She put her hand over his. "Then it goes badly," she said, "because there are horses on the drive." There were 4 of them, coming up through the frost in the grey light, and the man in front. They kept her 11 days. The cell was stone and it was cold, and she was not afraid of it, which surprised her. She had spent 2 years being afraid of exactly this, and now that it had come, it was only a room. She slept. She ate what they gave her. She thought about a man's hands on the arms of a chair. They let Glafira in once. The old woman sat on the bench with her back very straight and said, "He has not slept since Tuesday. He has sold the North Farms to pay for your counsel. I told him it was madness, and he told me to mind my own house. Tell him not to. I told him," he said, "and I am repeating him exactly, that he has spent 11 years being kept alive by people who wanted him dead, and he would like to spend some money keeping alive somebody who does not." Praskovia put her face in her hands and laughed until it turned into something else. The courtroom was full because the county had never had anything so good. She stood in the box in her one dress that was not her working dress and looked out at a sea of faces and found his in the middle of them. He had been carried in. He had let them carry him, in front of all those people, a duke lifted like furniture up the steps, and he had not once looked at the floor while they did it. The prosecutor was thorough. He talked about doses. He talked about a woman with no family and no character and no witnesses, alone in a room with a rich old man for 2 years. He said the word opportunity 9 times. He said the word motive 11. Then he said, "Miss Savyagina, did you love Lord Bewley?" And she said, "Yes." The room made a noise. "He was 81, the prosecutor said, "and you were his nurse. He called me daughter." Her voice did not shake, and she was so grateful for that, she nearly wept. "I never had a father. He asked for me at the end, and they did not fetch me, and I have thought about that every night for 2 years. So yes, I loved him, and a woman who loved him does not put bitter almond in his cup. You noticed the doses changing? Yes. And you told no one but the physician? Yes. Why? There it was, the thing she had never said out loud, not to a magistrate, not to a friend, not to God. She had carried it up and down 12 staircases, in 12 houses, and through one winter, where she ate once a day, and here it was, sitting in her mouth, in a room full of strangers, and she was going to have to open her teeth and let it out. She found Vsevolod in the crowd again. He did not nod. He did not smile. He just looked at her the way he had looked at her on the floor at 3 in the morning, and she remembered that a voice is a rope, and somebody had thrown her one once. "Because I was afraid," she said. "Of the accused? Of everyone." She lifted her chin. "I was a servant with no name, and he was the son of a great family, and I knew what happens. He would say one word, and I would say 1,000, and his one word would be worth more, so I said it quietly to the doctor, and I hoped the doctor would be braver than me." She swallowed. He was not. "And Lord Bewley died 9 days later, and I have known for 2 years that I could have shouted, and I did not, and no jury in England can punish me worse than I have already done it." The room was very quiet. "I am not here because I killed him," she said. "I am here because I was too frightened to save him. Those are not the same crime, and only one of them is mine." Glafira brought the box in herself. She would not let the constable carry it. She walked it up the aisle in her black dress with her chin out, 60 years old and unhurried, and set it on the table, and when they asked her name, she gave it, and then she gave 30 years of service, and then she gave the tack room. They opened the box. The strap was inside, stiff and dark, and the cut was exactly where she had said it would be, halfway through, clean, on the underside, where a man swinging up at a mounting block would never see it. The saddler they called was 70 and half deaf, and he turned it over twice and said the leather had been cut with a knife by someone who knew precisely how much to leave. Then Milica Vorontsova came and sat where Praskovia had sat. She was not in blue silk, she was in grey, and she had no pearls, and her hands would not stay still. "I saw him at the stables from my window," she said, "on the morning of the accident, and when they carried Vsevolod home, I said nothing, because I was engaged to a man who could no longer walk, and his brother was the one who would inherit, and I was 22, and I chose the brother." She stopped, her mouth twisted. "I have had 11 years to be sorry, and I have used every one of them." Yaropolk was tried after her. They offered him what they always offer: give us a name and keep your neck. He gave them Innocenti, who was dead. He gave them a groom who had been in Yorkshire that whole year. He gave them Glafira, and the court laughed at him, and that was the moment Praskovia watched him understand. Then he stood up in the dock and looked straight at his brother and said, "You were always the one they wanted. From the day I could walk, everything in that house had your name cut into it, and I had a chair at the end of the table and a pat on the head." And Vsevolod said, quite gently, into the silence, "You could have asked me for it. I would have given you all of it." They transported him. 14 years. He did not look back from the cart, and Vsevolod watched anyway, until it turned the corner, and Praskovia stood beside the chair, with her hand on his shoulder, and felt him shaking under her palm, and did not say a single word. Because some things are not for fixing, only for standing next to. Spring came late that year. The North farms were gone and the house was colder for it, and neither of them minded. Innocenti's case went in the fire. The 6th bottle went into the ground behind the stables, and Praskovia poured the vial from her coat lining after it, and stamped the earth down flat with her boot. He got stronger, not his legs. His legs were his legs and would always be, but his hands remembered how to hold a pen, and his mind came back to him in pieces all that spring. His mother's voice, the smell of the schoolroom, whole afternoons he had lost, and some days he wept about it, and some days he laughed, and some days he sat by the window and said nothing at all, and she let him. She stopped counting bottles. That was how she knew. One evening in May, she realized she had walked past an open medicine case and not looked inside, and she stood in the corridor with her hand on the wall and understood that the thing she had been doing since Wiltshire had finally put itself down. He asked her in the garden, in June, badly. "I have nothing left to offer you," he said. "Half the land is sold, and my name is in every paper in England, and I cannot even kneel. You went out of that chair for me, in a stable. That was different. That was the only kneeling I will ever need from anybody." She crouched in front of him in the grass, and took both his hands, the way he had taken hers by the fire. "Say it properly. Stay," he said. "Not as anything, as my wife. Stay." "Yes." He kissed her there with the bees going in the lavender, and her hands in his hair, and when she pulled back, his eyes were wet, and hers were worse, and he said, "You are the only person who ever sat down." They married in September, with the household in the front pews, and Glafira crying openly and pretending it was the cold. She kept working. He knew better than to ask her not to. She took in girls with no character, and no letters, and nowhere to go, and taught them what she knew, and the county talked, and then the county got used to it, and then the county started sending for them. And in November, standing at the window, with his arms around her waist and her back against his chest, she took his hand and put it flat on her stomach and waited. She felt him understand. He did not speak for a long moment. Then he said, "Horse, tell me the truth. Are you frightened?" "Every day," she said. "I do it anyway. You taught me that." "No," he said, and pressed his mouth to her shoulder. "You taught me that. So what happens when the child comes, and the county starts asking whose son will inherit a title his father can no longer ride out to defend? What does Praskovia do in the 14th year, when a cart comes back up that drive, and a man with grey in his hair asks his brother for 1 hour at the table? And has Militsa Vorontsova really finished paying, or is her story the one that has not started yet? That is where this one ends, and I hope it stayed with you. If it did, please subscribe. It is free, it takes 1 second, and it is honestly the only thing keeping this channel alive. Comment Snow if you want the sequel about what happens 14 years later, and tell me the moment that got you the most. I read every single one.